Nobody tells you that the most dangerous thing a woman can do is step forward when everything in her body is screaming at her to run. The tray was in Zara's hands. The room was silent. And the gun, the one that had been pointed at the man seated at the far end of the room, was now pointed directly at her chest. She did not move. She did not breathe. She didn't understand why her feet had carried her forward instead of backward. She didn't know this man's name. She didn't know what she had walked into. She only knew one thing. The gun was no longer pointing at him. It was pointing at her. This is the story of how a nursing student from Daegu ended up in the most dangerous room in Busan. And why, even knowing everything she knows now, she would step forward again. Zara Adaeze Kim was 24 years old, third-year nursing student, half Nigerian, half Korean, and she had spent her whole life being too much for one room and never quite enough for another. She had learned early that the world was not going to make space for her, so she made her own. She had inherited that from her grandmother, a tall, deep, brown-skinned woman who had married a Korean man in the 1980s and built a life in a country that stared at her every single day without apology. Her grandmother had never once flinched. She passed that down to Zara like bone. Don't shrink. Not for anyone. Zara was picking up shifts at Aria, Busan's most exclusive members-only restaurant, to cover tuition. Tonight was last minute. A colleague called in sick. A floor she had never worked. A tray of champagne she was never supposed to carry. She said yes because the money was good, and she never said no to good money. She picked up the tray and walked toward the private dining corridor and pushed open the door at the end of the hall. The silence hit her before anything else did. Not quiet, silence. The pressurized kind that fills a room when something is already in motion and cannot be stopped. 3 men, 2 standing, 1 seated at the head of a long obsidian table. And this was the one she noticed first, because he was the only one not moving. He sat with one arm resting on the armrest, jaw set, dark eyes tracking the room with a slowness that had nothing to do with fear. 2 guns pointed at his chest. He looked almost bored. Something about that was more frightening than the guns. Get out. Turn around right now and walk away, and do not look back. One of the gunmen turned and saw her. Their eyes met. Oh no. The second gunman moved. Fast, cutting sideways, blocking the door behind her. He pressed his back to the wall and raised his weapon, and now the angle had shifted. The line between that gun and the man at the table ran directly through where Zara was standing. She was in the middle of it. Move left, move right. The table, the door. There is nowhere. The gunman's arm came up. Zara stepped forward, her body decided before her mind did. 1 step, directly into the space between the gun and the man. She raised the tray in front of her chest the way a person grabs a door frame in an earthquake. Not because it helps, just because the body reaches for something. She shut her eyes. A crash. Glass on marble. No gunshot. When she opened her eyes, 2 men in black had dropped from a ceiling panel above the doorway. Both gunmen were face down on the floor in under 5 seconds. Weapons skidding across tile, knee in a back, forearm across a throat. Then stillness. The man at the table stood up. He was tall, broad in a way that a he-cut suit only partially managed to contain. He had a jawline that looked like a decision and dark eyes that were already scanning the room before his jacket had fully settled. He adjusted his cuffs, both of them, deliberately, as if the last 30 seconds were already filed away and done with. He walked around the table. He stopped in front of Zara. She was still holding the empty tray in front of her chest. One champagne flute had survived somehow, sitting at the edge, completely untouched. She noticed it because her brain needed something small to hold on to. He looked at the tray, then at her face. His eyes were very dark and very still, and there was something in them that she couldn't name. Not warmth, not cruelty, something more unsettling than either. The look of a man who had already decided something about her before she had said a single word. She lowered the tray. I was just... The champagne was for... You stepped in front of the gun, he said. His voice was low, even, the kind of voice that had never needed to rise because rooms went quiet before it had the chance. I didn't mean to, she said. Something moved across his face, the ghost of something she couldn't place. You didn't mean to step in front of a loaded weapon. I panicked. People who panic run, he said. She had no answer for that. Because he was right. She had no idea why she had moved forward. Even standing here right now, she couldn't explain it. He studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then, what's your name? Zara. It came out before she could stop it. Zara Adaeze Kim. He held her name in his mouth for a second, like he was placing it somewhere specific. Then he turned and walked out without another word. One of the men in black appeared at her shoulder. Come with me, the man said. Oh, so I am going to die after all. Some people are born knowing how to run from danger. And then there are women like Zara, who somehow, in the worst moment, move toward it instead. If you've ever done something brave before your brain had time to stop you, you already understand her. Stay with this story. It's just getting started. They took her to the top floor. The room was nothing like what she expected. Soft lighting, a cream sofa, a glass wall overlooking Busan harbor, black water and lit bridges stretching out like jewelry draped across the dark. Tea appeared on the table in front of her before she had finished sitting down. She hadn't heard anyone come in. A woman stood across from her, Korean, mid-40s, the kind of elegant that had been earned through years of watching everything carefully and showing nothing. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at Zara the way a person looks at something they have already assessed and are simply confirming. You work at Aria part-time, the woman said. Not a question. Third-year nursing student, Busan National University. You moved here from Daegu 2 years ago. No criminal record. No affiliations. She paused. You really did just walk through the wrong door. Zara's stomach tightened. They had run her background in the time it took to ride the elevator up. They know everything about me, and I don't even know his name. You're free to go, the woman said. A car will take you home. Tonight didn't happen. Zara nodded. She stood up. The door opened. Chaewon walked in. He glanced at the woman. One look, the length of a breath, and the woman stood, inclined her head slightly, and left without a word. Chaewon sat in the chair she had just vacated. He didn't look at Zara immediately. He looked at the harbor, like he needed a second. Like whatever was happening behind his face required a moment to settle before he turned it toward anyone. Then he looked at her. Why did you step forward? He said. I told you. I panicked. You said that already. His voice was flat, not unkind, just done with that answer. I want the real one. That is the real one. You held the tray up, he said. After you stepped, you raised it in front of you. That's not panic. That's instinct. Those are different things. She looked at him. He was right. She hated that he was right. I don't know, she said. I genuinely don't know. He studied her the way he'd studied the room downstairs, measuring. And then something shifted in his expression. Small, almost invisible, like a door opening 1 inch and then closing again. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "I'm terrified of you." "Then why do you keep answering me like I'm just a person?" "Because I was too scared to do anything else." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Don't apologize for it." He stood up and left. And Zara sat alone in a beautiful room above a city that had just shown her how large and how cold it actually was, thinking about a man who had walked out on her twice in one night and somehow taken all the air in the room with him both times. That, she told herself firmly, is not something to think about. She thought about it the entire car ride home. 1 week later, she rounded the corner on the third floor of Busan General and nearly walked into him. He had 2 men with him, large, quiet, standing far enough back to give him privacy, but close enough to make a point. He was standing outside a closed door, not moving toward it, just standing. The moment he saw her, something crossed his face that she had not seen in the restaurant. Something unguarded, gone almost instantly. But she had seen it. She knew this situation. She had seen it dozens of times on this floor. The person who could not make themselves go in, who stood outside the door because going in made it real. She didn't ask. "My mother," he said. She hadn't asked. He told her anyway. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the tiredness under the control. The way he was holding his shoulders slightly too high, the faint shadow under his eyes that said he had not slept properly in days. "What did the doctors tell you?" she said. He told her. He used the exact medical language the doctors had given him, word for word, like a man who had memorized something he didn't fully understand because understanding it felt too close to accepting it. She translated it. Plain language. What it actually meant, what the surgery involved, what the recovery looked like. She watched his face as she spoke and watched the tension in it shift. Not disappear, just change shape. From fear of the unknown to fear of something concrete. That was always better. Concrete things could be handled. "She'll need 4 to 6 weeks after surgery," Zara finished. "But the road exists. That's the part that matters." He was quiet for a moment. "You look like you haven't eaten today," she said. "I haven't." Just that. Fact, not admission. Like the idea of eating had simply not occurred to him. She started to leave. Zara. Just her name. Nothing after it. She turned back. He was looking at the closed door. "She asks me every time," he said. "First thing, when she wakes up, she asks if I'm happy." "What do you tell her?" Pause long enough to answer the question before he spoke. "Whatever keeps her from worrying." Zara looked at him, standing outside his mother's hospital room. This broad, controlled, dangerous man who moved through Busan like the city owed him something, and felt something shift in her chest that she had no interest in examining. She left before it could settle. 3 weeks in, and she still could not name what they were doing, not friendship, not anything she had a word for. He called sometimes. Late, brief, no explanation for why. She answered. They met twice at the hospital, once for dinner that neither of them called dinner. She ordered too much food, and he ate more than she expected, and she filed that detail away for reasons she refused to examine. Then she found out about the decision he had made without telling her. One of the nurses she worked with mentioned it casually, that a man had come to the hospital asking questions about her. Security had turned him away before she ever knew. She asked around quietly. It had been handled by Jaewon's people. He had found out someone was gathering information on her, and he had shut it down in a single afternoon. He hadn't told her. She called him that evening. "Someone was asking about me at the hospital," she said. "I handled it. I know you handled it." Her voice was steady. "When were you going to tell me?" It was resolved. There was nothing to tell. There was everything to tell. She stopped, took a breath. "You made a decision about my life, Jaewon. Without asking me. Without even telling me after. I made a decision that kept you safe. Those are not the same thing." Silence on the line. "I don't understand why you're angry," he said. And the most frightening part was that he meant it. He was not being defensive. He genuinely did not understand. He had spent so long making decisions for other people, managing, controlling, protecting, that it had never once occurred to him to ask whether the people he was protecting wanted a choice. "I know you don't," she said. "That's the problem." She hung up. He did not call back. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him to. 2 days later, she was walking home from her evening shift when the black car pulled up alongside her. She recognized the model. Different plates. Same slow roll. Her pace didn't change. The car stopped ahead of her. A man got out. He wasn't large. He was neat, middle-aged, the kind of unremarkable that was deliberately constructed. He stood on the pavement and waited for her to reach him. She stopped 2 meters away. "We know your rotation schedule," he said pleasantly. "We know your mother's address in Daegu, the house on the corner with the blue gate." He tilted his head. "Tell Kwan that loyalty has a memory." He got back in the car. It pulled away. Zara stood on the pavement alone. The street was completely normal around her. A woman walking a dog, a food delivery bike passing, a convenience store humming with yellow light 20 meters ahead. Everything ordinary. Everything completely indifferent to the fact that a stranger had just said her mother's address out loud, like it was nothing. Her hands were not shaking. She made them stay still. She went home. She sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet and her phone in her hands, and she thought about what it meant to dial his number right now. She thought about it for a long time, because calling him by accident was one thing. Calling him on purpose, knowing exactly what it meant, knowing she was not walking into any kisabadati thing anymore. She was choosing it. That was something entirely different. She dialed. It rang twice. Zara. His voice, just her name, like he had been waiting. She closed her eyes. "They know where my mother lives," she said. There are moments a person replays forever. Not the obvious ones. Not the accidents or the losses or the nights everything collapsed. The small ones. A phone against an ear. A number already dialed. The sound of ringing in a quiet apartment. Zara would replay this one for years. Not because of what came after. Because of what she felt in the silence before he answered. She felt free. And she felt the end of free. Both at once. Sitting on her kitchen floor. She chose anyway. He arrived in 26 minutes. She knew because she had been watching the door without meaning to. He came in without excess. No visible panic. No dramatic entrance. But his jaw was tight in a way she hadn't seen before, and he scanned her apartment once with his eyes before he looked at her directly. Checking. Making sure. Then he made calls. He moved to the window and spoke in a voice too low to hear clearly, and within 4 minutes, his people were mobilized. She could tell by the way his posture changed, something releasing slightly, the machine running, everything being handled. She watched him from the couch. He's doing it again. Jaewon. He kept moving. Jaewon. Stop. He stopped, turned. Sit down. He looked at her the way a person looks at a request that doesn't translate. like she had spoken a word he recognized but couldn't locate in this context. Sitting down meant the problem was still in the room. Sitting down meant he had to feel it instead of solve it. He sat down. It cost him something. She could see it in the set of his shoulders. That controlled stillness that was not calm, but the performance of calm. He sat on the opposite end of the couch, and he looked at her, and he waited. "They said my mother's address," she said, out loud, on the street, like it was nothing, like they had already decided that she was something they could reach if they needed to. He said nothing, but something moved behind his eyes. I stood there, and I made my face. "Do nothing," she continued, "because my grandmother didn't raise me to fall apart in front of people who want to see it." "But Jaewon." She stopped, steadied herself. "I was so angry. I am still so angry. And I need you to sit here and hear that before you fix a single thing." The room was quiet. He did not reach for his phone. He did not move toward the window. He sat with it, with her anger, with the weight of what his world had walked into hers and done. And she watched him feel it in the way people feel things they have been avoiding for a long time. Slowly, like ice thawing somewhere deep. "I'm sorry," he said finally. She looked at him. "Not for the faction," he added, "for the decision I made without asking you. At the hospital. I thought being right was the same as being okay." He paused. "It isn't." "Was that hard to say?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "That's what honest feels like." Neither of them moved for a moment. Outside the window, Busan carried on. Indifferent, glittering, enormous. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Something crossed his face. "The faction has been located," he said. "It will be handled by morning." "Okay," she said. She believed him. That was the part she hadn't expected. That she would sit in her kitchen and believe a man like this when he said something would be handled. She didn't examine that too closely. He left at midnight. At the door, he turned back once, like he was going to say something, and then didn't. She stood in the hallway and watched him go and thought, this is the most complicated thing I have ever chosen. 3 days later, her rotation supervisor called her into the office. The office was small and aggressively neutral. Beige walls, a desk, a window facing the interior corridor. Her supervisor was a careful woman who chose her words the way a lawyer chooses words, precisely, with distance built in. "There's been a complaint," she said, anonymous, regarding your conduct outside of clinical hours. Zara kept her face still. "The complaint alleges that you have been seen entering and leaving establishments connected to known criminal organizations." The supervisor folded her hands. "And that your association with certain individuals may represent a liability to this institution." There it is, the Jong faction. Even after Chaewon's assurance, even after mourning, they had found a different angle, and they had used it, and they had done it cleanly. No violence, no confrontation, just a single, anonymous complaint filed in the right place. "Your rotation is suspended pending review," her supervisor said. "This is not a termination. It is a pause." A pause. 3 years of shifts and student loans and nights studying until 2 in the morning, and it is called a pause. "Understood," Zara said. She stood up. She walked out of the office. She walked down the corridor and into the stairwell, and she stood there for a moment in the fluorescent quiet and felt the full weight of it. She was not going to cry. Not here. Have you ever paid a price for a world you didn't choose? Lost something real because of someone else's war? drop it in the comments. Because what Zara is about to face, nobody warned her about this part. But the anger came, clean and hot and honest. Not at Jaewon specifically. This was beyond specific. This was at the whole architecture of it. The way women like her, mixed and unclassifiable and refusing to disappear, always got handed the bill for things that weren't their fault. She had not asked for any of this. She had walked through a door carrying champagne, and now her career was bleeding. Her phone rang. She already knew before she looked. "I can fix," he started. "Don't. Flat. No room in it. Don't call anyone. Don't move on this without telling me first. Not one step." Silence. "Okay," he said. "I need a week." "Okay." She hung up. She sat on the stairwell, steps alone, and looked at the wall and thought about her grandmother, who had built a life in the space between two worlds without surrendering to either one of them, who had walked into rooms that didn't want her and stayed anyway, not out of stubbornness, but out of a deep, unshakable certainty that she had every right to be there. "You don't leave because it gets hard," her grandmother had told her once. "You leave when you decide to, not when someone else decides for you." She was not leaving, but she was going to do this her way. 7 days. He called once each day. Brief, no pressure, just her name and a question and silence after she answered. She noticed he didn't push. She noticed it cost him something not to. On the 3rd day, she thought about that more than she wanted to admit. On day 4, she pulled out her grandmother's photograph from the drawer beside her bed, the one from the 80s, her grandmother standing on a Busan street in a bright orange dress, completely at ease in a city that was still deciding whether to accept her. She had that look on her face, the one Zara knew in her own mirror, the one that said, "I see you looking. I'm not going anywhere." On day 7, Zara went to the hospital and walked into her supervisor's office without an appointment and asked directly what was required for reinstatement. She wrote down every condition. She started the process herself that afternoon. No calls made on her behalf. No names used. Her hands, her work, her record. Then she went to find him. She found him at the hospital, not at his office, not at any of the places his people had quietly made available to her over the past weeks. The hospital. Same corridor, same closed door. The symmetry of it was not lost on her. He heard her footsteps and turned. When he saw her, something in his face shifted. Relief, quickly contained. He didn't move toward her. He stayed where he was and let her close the distance. He had learned that much. She stopped beside him, not in front of him, beside him, looking at the same door. "My reinstatement gets confirmed in 3 weeks," she said. "I handled it myself. I know. You watched and didn't touch it." "It was hard," he said simply. "Not, I wanted to. Not, I had to stop myself 4 times. Just the fact. Stripped down." She had noticed over these weeks that this was how he told the truth. He reduced it to its smallest form and handed it over like that was already a significant thing to give. For him, it was. She looked at the door. "How is she today?" "Restless," he said. "She keeps asking the nurses questions they're not qualified to answer. They come to get me, and I don't know the answers either." Something almost wry moved through his voice. "She's going to be fine." "She sounds like she's going to be a problem," Zara said. "She has always been a problem." This time, it was unmistakably fond. Zara was quiet for a moment. The corridor around them had the particular late afternoon stillness of a hospital winding down. A trolley somewhere, a distant PA system, the specific quality of light that comes through institutional windows at 4 o'clock. She had spent hundreds of hours in corridors like this one. She had never once stood in one and felt what she felt right now. "I want to meet her," she said. He turned to look at her, not the calculating look, not the assessing one, the full one, the one that had no agenda behind it, just him looking at her without the usual layer of management between them. "You understand what that means," he said. "I understand." Zara. Her name in his mouth had always carried something. Right now, it carried a question he couldn't quite shape into words. She could see him trying. "I'm not walking in blind," she said. "I'm walking in knowing exactly what's on the other side of that door. I've had a week to think about it. A real week, not a week where I talked myself into something. I sat with it. I sat with all of it." She met his eyes. "I'm not choosing you because I fell into this. I'm choosing it because I decided to. That's different." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he opened the door. Kwon Soon-ja was sitting up in bed. She was smaller than Zara had expected, fine-boned, with close-cropped silver hair and a stillness about her that was completely different from her son's. His stillness was controlled. Hers was earned. The stillness of a woman who had already survived the things other people spent their lives fearing and had come out the other side with a very clear sense of what actually mattered. Her eyes went to Zara immediately. Sharp, dark, the kind of eyes that did not miss things. She looked at Zara the way her son had looked at her that first night, measuring. But where Jaewon's assessment had felt like a security check, his mother's felt like something closer to recognition, like she was looking for something specific and finding it. "You're the girl," she said. "I'm Zara," she said. "I know who you are." Soonja's gaze moved to her son, standing just behind Zara's shoulder. Something passed across the older woman's face, something that had been held in waiting for a long time, and was only now being released. "You look like her," she said to Jaewon. "When you stand like that, behind someone instead of in front." Jaewon said nothing, but Zara felt him shift slightly behind her. Soonja looked back at Zara. "You stepped in front of a bullet for a man you didn't know," she said. "I didn't know it was him," Zara said. "I just saw where the gun was pointing. Would it have changed anything if you had known?" Zara thought about it. Genuinely. "No," she said. "Probably not." Soonja smiled. It was a real smile, wide and a little surprised, like Zara had passed a test she hadn't announced she was giving. Then it faded into something more serious. She gestured at the chair beside the bed. "Sit down," she said. "There are things you need to know about this family before you decide you're in it. Not the version my son has told himself, not the cleaned-up version. The true one." Behind her, Zara heard Jaewon go still. "Iyama." She chose. Soonja did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. She walked in here with her eyes open, and she chose. She deserves to know the full weight of what she chose. If this moment hit you, if you felt the weight of those 6 words, hit the like button right now. Because this is the kind of story that doesn't get made enough. And the only way it reaches the people who need it is if you put it there. Silence filled the room. Zara sat down. She looked at this woman, this small, silver-haired woman who had built something enormous and survived her own heart failing and was now sitting in a hospital bed, preparing to tell the truth about all of it. And she felt no urge to stand back up. Soonja looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked at Zara. "My husband did not leave this family to Jaewon," she said quietly. "He left it to me. I chose to pass it to my son. That means everything that has happened, every enemy, every debt, every decision that has cost someone something, that begins with me." She paused. "Including what happened to you this week." The room was very quiet. She knows about the rotation suspension. Of course she did. I'm not here to apologize on behalf of the family, Soonja continued. I'm here to tell you and that if you sit in that chair and listen to what I'm about to tell you, all of it, and you still want to be here after, then you are here as someone who chose fully, not someone who was surprised later. Her eyes were steady. And if you stand up and walk out that door right now, I will respect that completely. So will my son. Zara glanced back at Jaewon. He was standing near the window, arms at his sides, not pleading, not performing, just waiting, with the particular patience of a man who had finally understood that some things could not be managed or controlled, only endured. She turned back to Soonja. Tell me, she said. Soonja told her everything, not in the way people confess, rushed, guilty, looking for relief. She told it the way someone reads a map. Steady, specific. This road leads here. This decision cost this. This is where the blood is. She did not soften it, and she did not perform it. She simply laid it down between them like documents on a table and let Zara read. The Kwan family had controlled the southern port trade routes for 30 years. Not all of it illegal, most of it wasn't. Not anymore. But the foundation it was built on, the agreements that held it together, the debts that kept certain people loyal and certain other people quiet, those were not clean. They had never been clean. Soonja had understood that when she married into it. She had understood it more clearly when she took it over. 3 families tried to dismantle us in the last decade, she said. The Zhang faction is the 4th. They are not the most dangerous thing we have faced. She paused. But they are, the most patient. And patient enemies are the ones that reach the people you didn't think to protect. Zara held that. My mother, she said. Your mother is being watched over as of 4 days ago, Soonja said. Jaewon arranged it. He didn't tell you because, she glanced at her son briefly, because he is still learning the difference between protecting someone and deciding for them. She said it without cruelty, just fact, the way a mother names a thing she has watched for years. He will keep learning. He is stubborn, but he is not stupid. From the window, Jaewon said nothing, but the tips of his ears darkened slightly. Zara almost smiled. Soonja leaned forward slightly. Her voice dropped, not to a whisper, just to something more direct, more private. The Zhang faction filed the complaint against your rotation, she said. We know who made the call. That will be addressed. Not violently. Those days are largely behind us, whatever people believe. But it will be addressed. She held Zara's eyes. Your career will not be the price of being near my son. I will not allow that. But I need you to understand. There will be other prices. Not today, not tomorrow. But this world asks for things eventually. It always does. The room was quiet enough that Zara could hear the soft rhythm of the monitors beside the bed. What did it ask from you? She said. Soonja looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across her face, old and heavy and fully accepted. Time, she said. It took my time. Years of looking over my shoulder. Years of trust being a calculation instead of a feeling. She settled back against the pillow. And one person I loved, who decided the price was too high and walked away. I didn't blame them. I still don't. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of something true that had been said and needed a moment to settle. Zara looked at her hands. She thought about her grandmother, about an orange dress on a Busan street. About a woman who had walked into a world that didn't fully want her and stayed, not because the world changed, but because she refused to let it define the size of her life. She had not stayed naively. She had stayed knowing exactly what it would ask. She had paid the prices as they came, and she had built something real inside all of it. A family, a life, a granddaughter sitting in a hospital room in Busan who had inherited her spine. You don't leave because it gets hard. You leave when you decide to. Zara looked up. Soonja was watching her with those dark, careful eyes. "I'm not leaving," Zara said. "I know," Soonja said. "I knew when you walked in." She glanced past Zara to her son. "She walks like your grandmother too," she said. "The Nigerian one. I've seen the photograph." Jaewon moved away from the window. He came to stand beside Zara's chair. Not behind her this time. Beside her. She felt the shift. "You've seen the photograph," Zara said. "I had someone find it," he said. She turned to look at him. "When?" she said. "The night after the restaurant," he said. "When I found out your name." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had run her background before he knew her name, who had looked at a photograph of her grandmother before he had any right to, who had made decisions for her life that were not his to make, and who was also the man who had sat on her couch when everything in him wanted to stand, who had said it was hard instead of pretending it wasn't, who was standing beside her right now instead of in front of her. She did not say anything. She turned back to Soonja. "You said there would be other prices," she said. "I'm not asking you to tell me what they are. I'm telling you that when they come, I want to know. Not after. Not managed. I want to know first." Soonja looked at her with something that was unmistakably respect. "Agreed," she said. She extended her hand, not a handshake, something more deliberate than that. Her palm open, an offering. Zara took it. Soonja's hand was cool and firm and held hers for exactly the right amount of time. Then she released it and settled back and looked at her son. "Feed her," she said. "She looks like she hasn't eaten." "I ate this morning," Zara said. "That's not eating, that's surviving." Soonja waved them both toward the door. "Go. Come back tomorrow. We have more to discuss." Jaewon touched the small of Zara's back as they moved toward the door. Light. Brief. She didn't pull away. In the corridor, they walked side by side. She didn't know what was coming. She knew it would not be simple. She knew the Jung faction was not fully resolved, and the prices would come. And there would be days she stood in a stairwell and held her face together by sheer force of will. She knew all of that. She had walked in knowing. The corridor was long, and the light was amber, and somewhere above the city, night was starting to settle over Busan. And Zara Adaeze Kim, nursing student, wrong door opener, woman who stepped forward, walked through it without shrinking. Her grandmother would have loved this. Every single complicated, costly, living bit of it.
Zara didn't save him because she was fearless. She saved him because she didn't stop to ask for permission. Not from the room, not from the gun, and not from the part of herself that wanted to run. And then she spent the rest of the story paying for that one step. Her career, her peace, her certainty, all of it shaken. But here's what she never lost, the decision. It was always hers. That's what this story is really about. Not the mafia, not the romance. A woman who refused to let the world make choices for her, even when the world hit back hard. If Zara taught you something today about courage, about cost, about what it means to choose with your eyes fully open, subscribe. Because every story on this channel is built for women like her.